Good afternoon. This is Fight for Flight. You can watch us on YouTube. You can listen in on Spotify. You can follow along on your favorite social media platforms. I'm your host, David Hobson, and however you may be listening, I appreciate you making us a part of your day. Welcome back, everybody. It's Monday, and that means that it's another chance to talk about disc golf, another chance to talk about life, and another chance to figure out why James Proctor looks like he's been taking fashion advice from Chris Dickerson. And man, do we have a show for you. We're going to start the show, as we always do, with our predictions for the previous tournament. I made some predictions for the MVP Open, and we're going to see where I hit the bullseye and where I took the bogey. Then we're going to look at some highlights, some key highlights throughout the tournament, and do a tournament breakdown for the women and also for the men. And then, to finish out our show today, we have a special guest interview. Mr. Scott Stokely is joining us on the show. He's going to be providing some disc golf tips, sharing a few tour stories, and revealing what really matters to take strokes off of your game. So hang out with me for a while, and let's get down to business. I want to start by congratulating James Proctor and Missy Gannon for their wins at the MVP Open. James Proctor and Paul McBeth went on an absolute heater on Sunday to come back, beat Aaron Gossage, Ricky Wysocki, and Gannon Burr, which Aaron and Ricky were co-leaders on Sunday, with Gannon one shot back. And what a come-behind victory for both James Proctor and also Paul McBeth, who took solo second. James shot 8 under for the win, and then Paul shot 11 under par, tying Andrew Marweed and Corey Ellis for the lowest rounds of the tournament. Missy Gannon, she exhibited maturity, calmly dismantling the competition. There was never a time where I felt that this was out of her grasp or that the moment was too big for her. She was fantastic off of the tee. She was gritty when she needed to scramble for par, hit some very big putts, and she was absolutely amazing throughout this weekend at the MVP Open. So let's get right into my tournament predictions in a segment that I like to call Bullseye or Bogey. I predicted that Calvin Heimberg would finish in the top 10. This was a bogey. He finished 28th place, did not play well at all throughout the weekend, never really got it going, wasn't great off the tee, wasn't great on the green, just really never got anything going the entire week, finished tied for 28th place. I also predicted that Simon Lizotte would finish in the top 5. Simon at Maple Hill is a combo that I like to bet on. He's played very well there in the past, but he finished tied for 63rd, and he finished 2 over for the entire tournament. I don't remember the last time that Simon Lizotte played over par for a tournament, but it's not very often that he does this. His best round was a 2 under par on Saturday. So took the bogey on the Simon Lizotte prediction. Gannon Burr, I predicted that he would finish in the top 3. This was a bullseye. He finished tied for 3rd, 2 shots off the lead at 27 under par. It's easy when you're betting on the world number 1. He always shows up. He always does his thing. Gannon Burr, bullseye in the top 3. Now let's talk about the ladies. I predicted that Owen Scoggins would finish in the top 10. She outperformed where I thought she might be. She finished in solo 4th place. The weather also was different than the forecast when I recorded last week's show. When I recorded it, it said that it was going to rain basically every day at the MVP Open. That was really not the case. The rain had very little to do with the tournament. And Owen Scoggins, that forehand was really doing well for her, and she hit some very big putts, finishing solo 4th, bullseye for the top 10 prediction. I predicted that Holland Hanley would finish in the top 5. This was a bogey. She finished 1 off of that in solo 6th place. What a great tournament by Holland Hanley, throwing great backhands, hitting lines, and I honestly thought that she had a chance up until about halfway through the round on Saturday going into Sunday. Holland is one of those people that can come out shooting hot and really has a lot of talent, but really wasn't able to get into the conversation for the win, but played exceptionally well throughout the tournament, finishing solo 6th. I predicted that Kristin Tattar would finish in the top 3. This was an absolute bullseye. She finished solo second, and she finished second in the world rankings. She had an opportunity to win this tournament. She was basically one shot from taking it to a playoff or winning it, and wasn't able to get it done, but played exceptionally throughout the week. And I thought that she did a good job of taking the motivation and the momentum from last week's win and kind of bringing it into this week. It's been absolutely incredible, and she played extremely well. So now let's break down what actually happened in the FPO division. Let's take a look at these ladies. Number one, it's notable that Paige Pierce was in the conversation for the first time since she won a mid-season in Portland. She has struggled very much by her standards in 2024. Paige was the best female player in the world for a very long time, but she was not struggling on Sunday. This was her tee shot on the iconic hole 8. Let's check out her tee shot and putt.
Pierce has the line calling for it to be the one. Pierce drops to a knee. Paige Pierce has birdied exactly half of the holes today.
Disc golf is so much better when Paige Pierce is playing well. Congrats to Paige for finishing solo fourth in the MVP Open. Now let's look at Owen Scoggins and Ella Hansen. Owen finished solo third place. Ella finished in solo fifth. I almost picked Ella to finish top 5. I literally had her in my notes, and I was about to do the show last week and looked at the weather forecast and thought, this is not good for Ella, because Ella is a big forehand player, and there are a lot of shots that are very demanding for forehands. And I thought, okay, this is going to be a really tough course, really tough weekend for her if the disc starts slipping. And so I replaced her with Holland Hanley last second, but Ella put up a great weekend, and they both, honestly, put on a show the entire weekend. If you watch the MVP Open, you know that hole 14 is a huge water carry. This was their tee shots on hole 14.
Just under 300 feet, and Missy was leaving that short to begin with. So she's going to have a putt from the drop zone to try and save a par.
No putting required for Ella Hansen. Drop-in birdie. Scoggins just barely over the wall and just as close as Hansen.
Now let's talk about our leaders. Missy Gannon and Kristin Tattar were tied at 18 under going into the final hole. Both of the ladies landed safely in the fairway and then chose to lay up and short of the island green and then basically just play for par. So let's watch the final shots that decided the tournament and the FPO World Number 1 for 2024.
She's cut it short. Kristin doesn't make the island.
Missy going with the sidearm. The biggest sidearm moment of her career, and she nails it.
Gannon wins it.
A big congratulations to Missy Gannon for not only winning the MVP Open, but for also unseating Kristin Tattar as the world number 1 in 2024. So now let's look at the men. James Conrad, not in the conversation for the win this week, but threw one of the most awesome shots, and it was kind of familiar looking, if you know what I mean. Let's check out his approach shot to the 18th green.
James Conrad on the throwing his second on 18. And there's no lane up here. Conrad going around the corner. Seen a shot shape of that nature from that distance before, haven't we?
Paul McBeth. He was not on the lead card going into Sunday, but obviously shot an exceptional round to take solo second. This was his approach shot into the 18th green, one of the most demanding approach shots. The GOAT is going for the win, and let's check out how it played out and how he got the solo lead going into the clubhouse down the stretch.
And Wysocki are going to be struggling to make par.
McBeth's in a great location here.
He's got to get it up high. He's got to drift right. You can't go too low here.
Inside.
He's got to get clean.
It's
he's done it.
McBeth gets to 28 under par.
Now let's talk about our winner. James Proctor was red hot on Sunday, and he needed a clean shot on 16 to keep it going. If you're familiar with Maple Hill, 16 is a very, very difficult tee shot. Let's look at James Proctor's backhand.
Clean tee shot here.
He's got it. It's clean at least.
It is, and he'll have a putt for birdie.
James Proctor slamming doors out here potentially.
James Proctor would go on to birdie the 16th, and then let's move to the 18th hole. Ricky and Gannon Burr threw great approach shots, securing birdies on the 18th green. And now let's look at the leader, James Proctor's chip shot into the 18th green.
It's got to wrap it around those 3 tree trunks moving right.
Proctor throws it out of bounds.
Throwing this little forehand out of bounds really brought Paul McBeth back into this tournament. James needs this drop zone putt to go in to prevent a playoff with the disc golf GOAT.
Now, he made this yesterday.
For the win.
James Proctor! Oh my gosh!
Mark my words, that putt will become iconic. The level of difficulty, the nerves, the situation, the pressure, the GOAT lurking in the clubhouse, that putt will be shown throughout future tournaments at Maple Hill for a very, very long time. So it's that time. Today, I have the pleasure of interviewing one of the disc golf legends. He was the first guy that I found on YouTube when I started the sport. He's a 17-time world and national disc golf champion. He's held the backhand and the forehand Guinness World Distance Record. He's accumulated more than 90 wins throughout his career. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the show, Mr. Scott Stokely.
Hello, I appreciate that. Hello, cheers of millions of fans. No, by the way, legend just means old. It means I lived long enough to be given positive nicknames.
Well, I know a lot of people want to know what inspired you to first pick up a disc and start playing disc golf.
So my dad died when I was 7 years old, and my mom would just take me to all the local parks in the area. And every park had something different to do. Like one had the biggest merry-go-round, one had the tallest swing set, one had a frisbee golf course, one had a tree I like to climb. It was just one of the things that one of the parks had. What I didn't realize at the time is that the course I was playing on was the only course in the entire world. So I started on the world's first course when there were no other courses. So I was there at the beginning. But it was about 7 miles away. I was 7 years old. 7 miles away when you're 7 years old is, that's might as well be in Europe, right? So I didn't play often, but the course bordered a really wealthy suburb of Los Angeles. And when I was 11 years old, my mom's business really started taking off, and she moved us from a blue-collar neighborhood to this wealthy neighborhood, and I did not fit in. Back in the 80s, if you were, I wasn't a poor kid. I was I was very comfortable in hindsight, but at the time I thought I was abject poverty because I was in a rich kid town, and I wasn't one of them. So I started spending all my days after school because I didn't have friends at the frisbee golf course, and that's where it started. I I wrote my autobiography, Scott Stokely Growing Up Disc Golf, and so I figured a lot of this out upon reflection. But at the time, there were no juniors basically playing, at least not every day in the park. It was a hippie sport. Parents kept their kids away from the park. It was mostly men that played, and so I think I gravitated towards all the grown men because I didn't have a father. They adopted me and took me and the Oak Grove Gophers, but I think I kind of was adopting them as well. And that's really what got me into it. It was really fun to do, but I didn't have friends, and I had family all like from day one.
Yeah, disc golf is a great community. I know I found that as well. It's one of the reasons I gravitated towards it as well. The community is amazing. And I'm interested to get your take on this. You know, back in the 90s, obviously there's fewer manufacturers for discs, basically Innova and Discraft. And now there's a lot more. But at what point in your career did you start noticing that the plastic was dramatically improving?
So, I mean, I've been there through the whole process. So that's happened always. There's been innovations in plastic. Back in going back to the like late 70s, early 80s, Frisbees, most of them were Frisbees because most were made by Waymo, not all, had plastic that was incredibly brittle and breakable. And there's still rules in the PDGA rule book that says if your disc breaks into more than two pieces, two or more sections, you play the largest section. That rule was not there but that wasn't a joke. I mean, sometimes your disc might hit a tree and break into 3 or 4 pieces. When Innova came out with the Eagle, not the current Eagle, but the first Eagle in 1983, that was absolutely revolutionary plastic. Discraft had come out with plastic before then for their Sky Streak. That was also an extremely high-end plastic, but it wasn't put into a beveled edge golf disc. So I think Discraft was the first to come out with the plastic, and then Innova came out with the first commercially popular, anyways, beveled edge disc that they put good plastic into. But good plastic by modern standards is like these were, when I say good plastic, it was Walmart DX plastic. But that was so much better than the plastic before. That was hot. And then the biggest jump in plastic, I would say, from the old plastic to the modern plastic, I think Discraft led the way in both of those as well. When they started putting out what they called Cyclone plastic, which is the Cyclone, the X-Clone, the Typhoon. These came out in this plastic. But then when they came out with what was called their Z plastic, their Z line, which was the first translucent plastic. Discs, like now they're called Star plastic, right, where you can kind of see through it. But Discraft with that as well. So I think Innova was on the forefront of the disc manufacturing, but I think Discraft was on the forefront of the new plastic blends because Discraft copied a lot of Innova discs, but I think Innova copied some of the Discraft plastic as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's switch gears really quick. You did a podcast back with Jeremy Colling, I want to say it's maybe 2 or 3 years ago, on your YouTube channel. And my favorite Scott Stokely quote came out of that. You said there's a bunch of players that they're great, but I'm not sure if they even know why. And I know you run instructional seminars all over the world. Can you explain how the Scott Stokely method not only produces better players, but smarter players as well?
So sure. So first off, when I say this, a lot of those players will admit it. If you ask Simon Lizotte why he throws far, he would say, because I throw it really far. Like, he doesn't put any thought into it. He's just always had proper mechanics since he was at an early age. You also have players that don't know why they throw far, that think they know why they throw far, and they say a bunch of things that aren't necessarily accurate. They'll talk about things that you're supposed to do on a throw that they don't even do themselves. So that's where, I mean, teaching and doing are two independent things. You can do both, you can do neither, but you could be good at one and not the other. They're completely independent, mostly. So what my method is, the Stokely disc golf method. Well, let me kind of, just if I could back up a second. So I back in the mid 90s, there was almost no teaching in disc golf, at least not on like any type of national level. You know, there was the occasional person that taught at their local course, maybe, you know, a local pro maybe gave a lesson or two. Tom Monroe taught a class in school on flying discs. So, I mean, I'm not the first person to teach, but I came up with the idea of traveling around the country doing throwing clinics. And I ended up going to 220 cities before any other traveling or touring pro had even gone to one to teaching disc golf. And then in 2000, I wrote the first book on how to disc golf. That actually was talking about professional disc golf technique. So I started teaching way back then. When I look at the way I taught back then, I don't think it was very good. But I was making up this stuff as I went along. I had no experience teaching, and there was nobody teaching disc golf before me to learn from. So I cut myself some slack, but I can objectively say it wasn't good by my modern self standard. So over the decades, what I developed, what I called the Stokely disc golf method, is not a different method of throwing. All right, whether it's me or Jeremy Colling or Simon Lizotte or, you know, any of the really good teachers out there, Philip Bartholomew or the Philo. I mean, we all agree on the right way to throw. Like, we can watch someone and say, that's right, that's wrong. The Stokely disc golf method is the process I developed to get you there. Because teaching the end result, which is this is what a person does when they throw, plant your foot here, rotate your shoulder here, transfer your weight there, it doesn't work. Like, if it worked, everybody would watch a YouTube video that says how to throw, and they would just go throw and be like, oh, wow, this disc golf is easy. I now throw far, and it goes where I'm aiming. Like, we know that doesn't work. So the process I developed after decades of trial and error and experimenting and getting it right and getting it wrong and learning is a method that if you follow my process step by step, you will end throwing correctly. So this is the method. It's a method of teaching to do it. And if I just add to it, like a summary of what the method looks like is there's basically two ways players learn how to disc golf. The first is, and I can even ask you, have you ever been told, just figure out what works best for you and do that? Right? You've heard something like that before, right?
Yes, I have.
Okay. That's just about the worst throwing advice there is. Okay, you can't throw any way you want to. Physics, biomechanics, like how our bodies move, that trumps your style. There's a right way to throw, mostly based on the laws of physics. And then also factoring in probabilities of success rate and a variance of how far you miss when you miss. But there's a right way to throw. There's a second way players learn how to throw, which virtually everybody's done some version of, which is you try to emulate another player or part of another player's throw. Maybe a pro, maybe even in slow motion. And anyone who's done that also learned that that doesn't work either, or at least it doesn't work well. It's not their fault. It is impossible. Right. It's impossible to copy a professional disc golfer's throwing mechanics and timing, not because they're better than you, but because they are throwing with a different body than you're throwing with. So every single disc golfer in the world is a different size, a different shape. We have different amounts of muscle mass in different areas. Our joints don't align at identical angles from one another. Even if they did, we have a different range of motion within our joints. Then we have different flexibilities, and then we have past injuries, scar tissue. It is impossible to copy it's impossible to copy any other player's throwing mechanics because you are throwing with a different machine than they are. At the same time, the worst advice you could do is to just throw any way you want to. There's a right way to throw. So the Stokely method is a process to get there, but the end result when you get there is to do the things that you must do, because you can't throw anything you want to. You must follow the laws of physics as far as how you're supposed to throw. However, within those laws of physics that you're trying to accomplish, there has to be room for individual bodies to move differently from one another. There cannot be an exact specific way to throw because everybody's different, but everybody must follow the same rules. And that's what it comes down to. If you throw these same rules or follow these small number of rules, every other part of the throw happens based on your individual body if you follow this process. So it's kind of a long answer, but that's really what it comes down to. You must follow certain rules, but every body looks different. And every sport in the world will agree with this, whether or not they say it. Like, there are rules to swinging a golf club that every golf pro will teach you are absolutely etched in stone. It's physics. It's the law of large numbers. Every pro in the world follows these rules. Yet golf swings among pros all look a little bit different because they're swinging with different bodies. You can't put every single golf club on a 19.7 degree plane at this point of the, your wrist starts to bend at this, when it gets to, no, our bodies are different. So there's rules to follow when you swing a golf club with allowances for individual bodies. That's what the Stokely method is, a process to learn how to follow the rules for your individual body. I know that's a very long answer, but if I just gave you a 10-second answer, it would be very dismissive of my process.
Absolutely. I mean, I can totally relate to that.
It's my life's work we're talking about here. So I put my entire life's work into a minute and a half. That's actually really impressive.
Absolutely. And for me, I know I deal with this as well because I had plenty of injuries in the Army. I had a parachute incident. So my main parachute failed, my reserve malfunctioned, and I'm very lucky to be here. Let's say that. So from my injuries that I had, shoulder injuries as well, they had some surgeries, did some things, a lot of physical therapy. I have some mobility issues, let's say that. And when I throw discs, sometimes I can't get my body into certain positions. And then I've noticed that as I've played, my mobility has actually gotten better. So I'll be throwing great shots, and then my mobility will get a little bit better, and then nothing works anymore. And then I have to relearn over and over again. So I completely relate to that.
Yeah, you have to follow what your own body will allow you to do. And anything that says 10 degrees, 3.34 seconds after thing A, you do thing B, anything that says that, it cannot possibly be correct when we all have different bodies. If everybody had an identical body, you could make up these rules, but we don't. And even to a point, they've studied this. Identical twins who are genetically identical, who grow up playing different sports, by the time they get to be adults, they don't have identical bodies. I mean, they're genetically identical, but they have just a lifetime of the tricep being bigger on one twin than the other, is constantly pulling at the shoulder and opens up something in the shoulder. Their joints aren't identical. So even identical twins don't have identical bodies. So the idea that me and you and her and him and that old person, young person, fat person, skinny person, tall person, short person, like, we're radically different from one another. There can't be one specific way. But again, that does not mean you can just throw any way you want to. There's still, the rules are written in stone. Physics trumps everything.
So,
I love this, by the way. If I sound like I'm just going on and on, it's like this is what excites me. I love teaching disc golf. It's the best.
I love it as well. It's the thing I nerd out on. I tend to do that. I tend to nerd out on things and really love kind of diving into it. I want everything to be a science and nothing to be an art. That way I can figure it out, but it doesn't work like that all the time. But I love it when I talk to somebody who understands the science of it so they can explain it to me so I can understand what I need to do.
Well, I'm a nerd, so there you go. I'm nerd one. I'm purebred nerd. Actually, I used to be. No, I'm not 100% purebred nerd. I thought I was purebred nerd until I got a Jeep. And then not only did I get a Jeep, about a year or two later, I went up to Montana just to start riding dirt bikes, and I was shooting guns. So I realized I'm actually like 85% nerd, 15% redneck, which is weird because I grew up in Los Angeles. But was it 23andMe? What's the test? 23andMe. Yeah, 23andMe told me I'm 15% redneck. I had no idea. I didn't know if I got a Jeep. I got a Jeep. I was like, why would anybody care about their car? And then all of a sudden I'm naming my Jeep and waving to people when I'm driving by, and I'm putting little rubber duckies up there I'm like, okay, I'm part redneck.
That's hilarious. So let's talk about some of the tournaments that you played. I know you played in a bunch of them, and I was recently watching the footage from 1997. I want to say it was at Winthrop University, and I was thinking about hole 5. The last time I was down there and played it, it's the big water hole on the water's on the left. There's a water carry essentially if you want a birdie now. I was wondering if you could just kind of take us through what it was back then. And then
97. No, that was USDGC. Hole 5 is the one of water. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, here's what was special about that hole. It's not just that hole, it's the whole course. Is that up until sometime in the late 90s, throughout most of the 90s, you weren't really playing real golf the way you did today. You were throwing an approach shot off the tee pad and then dropping in a putt or trying to make your putt. And I call it approach shots because I could reach nearly every single hole in the world with a putter or a mid-range. Now, there were a lot of players didn't throw as far as me, so they would be throwing drivers or had to throw drivers, but that's not because the holes were longer or because I threw so far. The level of distance just hadn't caught up to where I was. I was out throwing everybody by 100 feet. But I certainly wasn't throwing 100 feet farther than people today had I been born 20 years later, right? I'd be right where Anthony Brell is, maybe a little, I don't know, say a little farther, but I think I throw farther. But same ballpark. So in other words, people didn't throw far, but it was approach and putt. USDGC is one of the first places that actually said, no, we're going to have fairways, landing zones, position play. You're trying to land your shot, planning on your next one. They're not the first to do it. John Houck, I think, was the first to really make the most of that at the national doubles in Round Rock, Texas. But Harold Duvall expanded on that idea. Harold also did something which, whether you like it or not, he gets the credit for, which is the abundance of artificial out of bounds. The idea of roping off fairways and the whole right side of the fairway is out of bounds, but it's completely artificial. That started at USDGC. I don't think he invented the artificial out of bounds, but you might see it on one specific area, and it was probably because it was thorn bushes or something, or a cliff. If you're up in Colorado, he's the first one to actually line the fairways with it. I love it. I'm the guy that loves the artificial out of bounds, but he did both of those things. So that hole was basically, I could throw 100 feet, 150 feet farther than anyone else on tour at that time. But not on that hole because I'd be risking out of bounds. So I had to choose my risk reward based on the length of the hole. So I could gain a little distance, but not a lot without increasing the risk. And so I personally like that. I had an advantage because I threw far, but not such an advantage that I would just smoke everybody. I had to tone it back, which was great. And that's what hole 5 was. It was one of the first holes where it's almost like a modern ball golf course type of hole.
Yeah, it's really interesting. And I like what you said there. I really do like when a course is designed in a way where there's some few holes where guys who can rip it can just let it go. And then there's some technical shots as well. I like a variety. I think it really is good for viewership. I think it's good to force people to have well-developed games. They can't just throw a hyzer over the trees every single time just because they can. I like that as a viewer.
I do too, but I also like there to be rewards for throwing hard. There's one really long hole at Toboggan, which is a long, fairly open hole, and then it goes up a hill. It's early on the back 9, and I can't get to the basket in 2 throws. Anthony Barella can, Simon Lizotte can. I can't get there in 2 throws. And I don't have a problem with that. If I can't get there in 2 throws and they can, well, that's my damn fault for not throwing farther. And if I can't throw farther, that's not their fault. They should have an advantage. Throwing far is a skill just like throwing accurately, just like putting. And to take away all the advantage for throwing far because people misunderstand and think, well, accuracy is a skill because it feels like skill, and throwing far is just something that some people are able to do. It's like, no, it's a throwing technique. And I can't do it because I've aged out. But well, guess what? I'm 55. The 25-year-olds are supposed to get to some holes I can't get to. Like, of course,
Yeah.
right?
Absolutely. I mean, I think some of these guys are just impressing me every week with some of the shots that they're throwing. It's just insane to watch the lines that you'll see them look up in the air and you're like, what are they doing?
Yeah, I mean, I think Gannon Buhr's going to be really good someday.
Yeah. Unbelievably dominant.
Right? What do you think? We think, Adrian, you think so? You think Gannon Buhr's got potential?
He's all right.
Yeah, he's all right. He's going to be. Yeah, I would say I would look for Gannon to be. He's gonna make a big splash on the tour in a couple of years.
I honestly am so impressed by the consistency of his game as well, because he does have a massive top end, obviously, but he's just staying there, or maybe he's not staying there. Maybe he's not at his top end yet. I don't really know, but it's insane.
It is. It's really a good question to say. Is his level of play better than Paul's when Paul was at his peak? And I mean, certainly Gannon has to accomplish a hell of a lot more before you put him in that conversation. But like the game's still evolving. I mean, Paul, like I don't know. I mean, I would put Gannon in that conversation. I mean, you asked me Paul versus Gannon. Obviously, it's Paul. It's Paul, right? I mean, obviously,
right.
Paul is so much. I mean, Paul. I'm not even sure Paul isn't like who's the favorite to win the World Championships next year. It's like it still might be Paul. Like it's hard for me to bet against that guy, but Gannon is starting to make a case for if he continues this, he's maybe pushing the game forward. But he's got a little bit of time to before that conversation becomes serious, I think.
Yeah, and I also think too. I mean, he's so young. He's got a lot of years ahead of him. It's not like he's on a clock or anything. Some of these guys, they're trying to make their splash. They're trying to build their legacy, and years are ticking by, right? And he's so young.
Once Gannon gets to high school, he's going to have a whole bunch of different pressures in his life.
We'll see how he handles it.
We'll see how he does it. Let's see if he can handle the ninth grade.
It's unbelievable. His putting is just. It's almost crazy because if he's within 75 feet, I almost just expect him to make it. And I haven't really had that inclination as a viewer, as if I'm watching the tournament, there's not a lot of people that can step up to a 70-footer. And I'm like, I'm pretty sure this is going in.
Right. Let me tell you, I can tell you how good Gannon Buhr is at putting. And this is probably going to impress the hell out of you. But this year at the PDJ Pro World Championships, Gannon Buhr is so good at putting, he almost beat me at the Pro World Putting Championships this year. No, seriously, like he was.
I heard.
He was a couple putts away, and he would have beat me. I mean, he's got a big upside. He's going to get there someday.
Maybe you can get him out to a seminar.
Yeah, no, I don't want him to get any better.
Yeah, you got to go compete with him occasionally, right?
Well, as long as you put quotes around the word compete, sure.
Exactly.
Oh, yeah, actually, I'll tell you even a funnier story, though. So, Gannon Buhr and I have gone head-to-head 3 times on putting. The first time was it last year or was it this year? Earlier this year, I was at Gannon's house, right? We're all friends, and I think the world of his mom, and I was in Gannon's basement, putting in his basement, and his whole training thing. He's got the racks of putters, and he's got the basket set up. I mean, this is where he plays. He knows this inside and out. And so I was like, he goes, "Hey, you want to do a putting contest?" And I go, "Sure. Can I film it and put it on Instagram?" He's like, "Yeah, of course." And then I beat him. And then he goes, and I'm like, and I immediately posted to Instagram the video of me beating him. And he's like, man, so I get a rematch? And I'm like, can I post it to Instagram? He says, yeah. And then I beat him again. And I posted it to Instagram, and then he's like, can we have another rematch? And I said, no. And so I played him twice. And so I've actually only competed against him specifically in putting 3 times. Hey, by the way, anybody listening in before you because this is the internet age, I'm not claiming to be a better putter than Gannon. Obviously, that would be stupid. We have an entire season full of statistics to show that is not the case. I'm just saying when I went head-to-head with him the 3 times I've competed against him, I'm good enough to have had the upset all 3 times. How about that?
You got to love a good upset. I love an underdog. Who doesn't, right?
Well, check this out. Here, you want to hear something real fascinating? So, and I might get my numbers a tad off because the numbers change from year to year, but this is in the ballpark. What do you think the most relevant stat in disc golf is? Okay, UDisc, well, it used to be UDisc, had the fairways in regulation, out of bounds, circle one putting, et cetera. They have all the stats, right? Which statistic do you think correlates most with success on the Pro Tour? Like when you're looking at the top 3, 4, 5 people at a tour event and you look at the stats, what stats have the closest correlation? Which category?
I think probably greens in regulation.
I'm super impressed. You're one of the first people to ever get that.
I'm a nerd.
Most people think it's putting or circle one putting. And here's the thing about circle one putting. It's actually one of the least relevant stats in terms of success. And the reason why is that from a okay, by the way, I'm take this year out of the equation. I was sick this year. I missed 6 or 7 events because I was I had health issues not related to throwing. So my last full season, 2023. So I, on the Pro Tour, would not be considered a good putter. Now, I'm a really good putter. There's 15 million disc golfers. I'm one of the top putters in the whole world, right? But when you put me up against the Pro Tour putters on a Pro Tour event, I'm rated below the midway point. So I'm in the bottom half of the putters. Still really good, but blah, blah, blah. I am not a top putter. I'm never confused with being a top putter. When you look at my statistics and the top putter in the world, I lose something like 1 stroke every 20 holes to the top putter in the world. Not only that, there's times we make putts in circle 2. There's times we land in the bullseye, which means I actually only lose something like 2.3 strokes per tournament to the top putter in the world. We're all so good at putting that even though I am not a good putter, it's razor thin, right? Someone's 89% and I'm 84% or something like that in Circle 1X. I mean, it's that close. Now, the number one stat is greens in regulation, which you are correct. And the reason why is because if you throw on the green 9 times and you have a really bad putting day, you only make 7 out of 9 of those putts. If I land on the green 6 times, there's nothing I can do on the putting green to make up those strokes. I can be 100% putting and I still can't catch you if I'm on the green 6 times compared to your 9 times, even though you didn't putt as well. So you just simply having the ability to throw a disc and land it where you want, as simple as that sounds, is the number one stat. Now, here's what was interesting. One of the things that confused me about this thing, I knew that I was razor thin. It's pretty damn close. I had tournaments at the World Championships. I missed I think either 2 or 3 Circle 1 putts in 4 rounds. So I was missing less than a Circle 1 putt per round, and I'm not even a good putter, right? I think I missed 3 putts in 4 rounds, and that's from someone who's not good at putting. Quote. Now, when you look at Circle 2 putting stats, it always confused me because I was thinking, why the hell am I at 22% and Gannon Burr's at 40%? I said, this makes no sense because how could I be 5% worse than him or 7% worse than him, Circle 1, but I'm twice as good as me, Circle 2. And then I realized what it was. He's the best player in the world because of the number one stats, greens and regulation. He lands in the circle. He's better at throwing the disc where he wants it. That means that he also, when he misses the circle, he's closer to the circle than I am when I miss because he's better at throwing a disc where he wants it. So Gannon has 36-foot putts, and I have 44-foot putts. So, of course, the difference in our Circle 2 stats is widely different. So the reality is that, yes, Gannon's a better Circle 2 putter than me. Of course he is. No one, I would never argue that. But I bet I'm as close to him at Circle 2 putting or as I am Circle 1 putting. I mean, he's here. I'm not that far off. But because he's better at throwing a disc, he gives himself shorter putts. His Circle 2 stats will be inflated. So he's better, but it comes down, as silly as it sounds, it comes down to who's better at throwing a Frisbee and landing it where you're trying to land it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think sometimes people don't realize that. I'm so glad that you said this, by the way, because I said this in a show 2 weeks ago and people came for my head. Like they were commenting and telling me how wrong I was about, putting not being the most important thing. And I feel very validated at this point. So,
no, it's extremely important because if you're not a good putter, you're not even sniffing the Pro Tour.
100%.
So no, it is incredibly important. If you're a 75% Circle 1 putter, I don't care how good you are throwing a disc. You're if you're 1,000 rated, you'd have to throw like Gannon Bird to be 1,000 rated. I mean, because you're not making your putts. Maybe that's not. They'd probably still be 1,010 if you threw like Gannon. But if you threw like 1,025 rated player, you would be a 990 rated player if you weren't good at putting. Putting is really, really, really important. It's just at the highest level, everybody's really, 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 really good.
Yeah, and for me personally, I mean, I'm an amateur disc golfer. I'm not playing at a super high level. There's holes in my putting. I'm really good in C1 out to about 25. From 25 to the edge of the circle, I'm not as good. And then I'm actually a lot better from, shallow C2 up to about, say, 45, 50. I'm actually pretty good, but there's a hole in it. So my play is pretty consistent. If I throw the disc consistently and I am 30 feet away, I'm going to have a bad putting day. But if I am 5 feet on either side, I'm okay,
So here's what you should do. I have an online class called Become a Complete Disc Golfer, and it is a 6-month class, and it is it's what I'm most proud of in my teaching because I have put 6 months. I put my 30-something years of teaching into this 6-month online class. It's not just a bunch of videos and drills to work on. There's a step-by-step process to all these things, including putting, that you will follow. But as part of the process, you're going to be uploading videos and getting professional form reviews throughout the class. Because if it was just videos telling you what to do, that's YouTube, right? That's not. I wouldn't even charge that. The process is an interactive process, so it's basically like working with a coach one-on-one. It's just there's a time delay between you doing something and getting feedback because you're uploading and getting feedback. But it really does work. And a big part of it, and I won't go into the big pitch on this, but the big part of this with putting is that you can't just putt with any stance or form you choose. You can't emulate another player because your body moves in a very specific way. Your body determines your stance and form, not you. If you are putting in a way where the moving parts on your body, your shoulder, elbow, wrist, waist, hips, knees, ankles, right? If the parts of your body aren't moving in the way they're supposed to move, stuff is catching, stuff is pulling, you're inconsistent. It won't work. You have to find the stance and form that work for you. So the process is there's a back and forth process we go through where you find that. The minute you find your stance and form, which is how your body most fluidly moves for your body, the disc kind of goes to the same place every time. Quotes around every, right? But it goes to the same place every time. That's the beginning of being able to putt. Until you do that, you can't putt. I mean, you can, but like you're not going to get good at it. And so that's I would really recommend the online class. Well, any of the viewers, I guess, but checked it along. I mean, it's my life's work. I'm very proud of it.
I can always use the help. That's for sure, because I'm always trying to find ways to take strokes off the game, and putting is definitely a portion of that. So I'm definitely interested.
I was not considered a good putter in the 90s. I mean, obviously I was out there doing pretty well, so it must not have been that bad. But I didn't putt as well as Climo or Rick Vokes or Jeff Lissaman or Mike Moser. Like, go down the list of the good putters. I wasn't one of them. And fast forward to I'm 55 years old and I'm second place at the World Putting Championships because I've applied this method to how I putt, and it works. Yeah,
I mean, it makes sense to me. And I think that people need a solution, and I think that people are looking for a solution. So I want everybody to check it out.
But for a solution, so that's easy. Just go to scottstokely.net, and then there's the 6-month online classes under the instruction link.
Yeah, so a lot of athletes, myself included, sometimes we struggle a little bit with our mental health, and we experience anxiety, depression, and it affects our performance and basically everything we're doing, but it spills over into the disc golf course as well. And so my question is, have you ever experienced something similar to that with your mentality, and how are you able to overcome that in your game?
So I've experienced those things in my life. Usually when I'm away from disc golf. I've taken breaks from disc golf, and it typically doesn't go well for me when I take time away. So as far as how it affects my game, and this is going to be a very controversial answer, but I don't think it does. Mechanics are mechanics. Like if you hit a cue ball at the correct angle, it doesn't matter if you are the happiest person in the world or going through a divorce. It doesn't matter if your pet just died, or if you're about to be fired from your job, or if you're madly in love, or if you just had your first child and you realized why you're here. None of those things affect it. If the cue goes this angle at this speed and hits the ball goes. The ball doesn't care what's going on inside your head. And so to me, I truly believe the mechanics trump everything. I'm not saying mental game isn't important. That would be stupid. Obviously, I'm not saying that.
Sure.
I'm saying that I don't think it plays as large of a part as it's given credit for. And I'll before all your viewers posted I'm a moron, and they were fully bought into my teaching until I started talking about this. Don't click away yet, everybody. Please allow me a second to explain why I think this. So I like to use the sport of basketball. It's a more extreme example of what a good player looks like, and good athletics and good mechanics, bad mechanics, good mental game, bad mental game look like. Okay, so it's just, I think it's easier to see, although this applies to every sport. If you went to the University of Kentucky, the most coveted role for any young man at the University of Kentucky is to be one of the 12 players on the Wildcat basketball team. Like, you are the big man on campus. You get all the girls. You're going to make all the money someday. You don't even have to go to class to get all the straight A's, right? So that's what everybody would like to be, one of those 12 players. All right, go line up the 15,000 men. Just line them up in the quad, and if I asked you to pick out the 12 basketball players, I bet you could guess 7 or 8 of them by looking at them. Now, if I instead gave all 15,000 players a psychology test that would test things like their ability to concentrate, their ability to focus, their ability to stay calm under pressure, the ability to get into the whatever you want to go, whatever psychological, and I gave you the psychological test results, and I said, go pick out the 12 members of the basketball team, you'd be like, huh? You would be just closing your eyes, picking at random. You can't find a correlation between those things and the top athletes. So when I think about like the difference between the two, it's obvious. Like, if you want to be on the basketball team, do you need to be athletic? Yes. Do you need to be tall? Yes. Do you need to be coordinated? Yes. Do you need to be fast? Yes. That's black and white. But what about the mental part? Well, How do you deal with stress? Well, some of the kids on the team are calm under pressure. Some of those kids cry before every single game. Some of those kids' heart rate accelerates when they're at the free throw line. Some of them are flatline because they're robots. Some of them are totally calm when things don't go their way. Some of them have raging tempers. I don't see any correlation between the mental game and the success on the court. If there was, every single player in the court would have a temper, or 0 players on the court would have a temper. We don't see that. We see people with all different psychologies succeeding at these sports. What we don't see are all different levels of athletic ability and mechanics. All of them have proper mechanics. All of them train hard. All of them, like I said, all of them have some genetics on their side. So it's not the mental game. The correlation to athleticism is far greater than the correlation to mental game. Now, here's where I think mental game comes into play. And that is, once you have these athletes with good mechanics, well, there are other athletes out there that are just as talented and have the same mechanics as them who aren't making the team and who aren't going pro. So where mental game comes in is the separator between the people that are playing the sport properly with good mechanics. In other words, those 12 kids that are on the basketball team, there's probably 100 kids on campus that are just as tall and athletic as them, but only 12 make the team. Well, those 12 players have some mental things going for them. They are disciplined. They are willing to put out practice when they would rather be hanging out with their friends, right? They're motivated. They're driven. They're coachable. They have the ability to learn. They study the game. Like, these are important mental qualities that probably all of them have. So there's correlation to some mental aspects. But what we think of as far as mental game, the ability to focus, to get into the zone, to stay calm under pressure, I don't see that correlation. I just don't see it. So to me, it's a really long answer, but to me, this is one of the first steps. And if you start to let go of how important all these tricks and all the stuff you read about sports psychology, the minute you start to let that stuff go and you start to realize it's not as important, then you can let go of that and just focus on the mechanics, the technique, the training, the practice. And I think that to me is where your success is going to lie. I mean, look, there's no short, fat kids on the basketball team who are so good at getting into the zone that they're playing for the team. Right now, you would say, disc golf's different, because disc golf, you don't have to be tall and athletic. No, but you have to be hyper coordinated at a level that the basketball players probably aren't. You have to, you still have different, physical skills. It's just not.
And we're early on. We're early on in this disc golf thing, because in 20 years, I think there's disc golfers are going to look alike. I feel as the competition level rises, I think we're going to start seeing a type, I
mean, we already are seeing that. Look at the Pro Tour. I mean, not everybody on the Pro Tour looks as athletic as some other sports, but they look a hell of a lot more athletic than they did 10 or 20 years ago. Not even close. So it's gravitating towards that direction. So again, I know it's a super long question to your, or long answer to your question, but those are completely compartmentalized. I could be having the worst or the best day of my life. It has zero impact on whether or not I correctly put 8 degrees hyzer on my destroyer.
Right.
It's like they're completely separate. They're completely independent from one another. Mental game, I separate from throwing. Me.
That's really interesting. Like I said, I haven't actually heard a lot of people that have your take on it, but I also see the value in letting go, like you were talking about earlier. I think if you take everything to the course with you, you can't focus. It can get in the way at times.
I think our heads are our best friends when it comes to decision making, training, practicing. That's where our brain's on our side. When you're actually competing at the moment of competition, at the moment of the throw, at the moment of the swing of the bat, at the moment of the shot of the basketball, at that moment, our brains are only our enemies. We need to set our brains aside. And that's, and by the way, I wouldn't bore you with all the details, but there's data to back that up. There's plenty of data to suggest that what I'm saying is true. It's just, I also happen to believe it. Or I dropped out of school when I was 15 years old and I'm an idiot. And why are you listening to me? I'm just a frisbee golfer. What do I know? That's also possible.
Yeah. If somebody can sling a disc consistently better than I can, I tend to listen. Yeah, I want to know what they have to say.
Hey, these are opinions. A lot of really smart people will disagree with me, and I concede that they're very smart people. So I'm not saying I'm right. I'm just expressing my opinion based on my objective observation. This is what I've seen. That's all.
Yeah, well, I mean, you trained enough people now that I'm sure that you have the data to back up what you're saying as well. And, you've just kind of got it in blood, sweat, and tears over the years, watching people in seminars and all the people you've trained. It seems to me that if you've done enough of that, you're going to find commonalities.
Yeah. Well, here, you want me to expand on this a tiny bit more? Are you interested?
Oh, sure. Yeah, absolutely.
All right. So I'm going to tell you this is some of why I think the narrative about psychology is false. So I'm going to say something again. If you're listening to this, don't click off after I say this sentence. Please allow me to explain and hear me out. Okay, ready?
Let's do it.
There has never in the history of professional sports been a clutch athlete. How about that? Given a large enough sample size, in other words, not one Super Bowl or one game, but given a large enough sample size, no player in history has outperformed their season or career averages by a variance that is not just predicted by basic probability. No one's ever done that. Michael Jordan had the same shooting percentage in the playoffs as he did in the regular season. Michael Jordan had the same percentage of making three-point shots in the final 60 seconds of a game, in a game that was determined by less than 3 points, as he did in the second quarter of games. Michael Jordan wasn't clutch. In these situations, Michael Jordan did not outperform his season average. Now, the reason why we think he's clutch is because he was the best player on the court, and as such, he always got the ball in, quote, clutch situations, meaning at the end of the season, he made the most game-winning shots. He made the most clutch shots because, of course, he took the most clutch shots. But he didn't play better than his second quarter average, which means we think of him as clutch, but he did not elevate his game in an important moment at a higher level than he did in the second quarter. And I would argue that his shooting percentage in the second quarter that was the same in the final minute of the game is identical to his shooting percentage on the practice court. That's how often he makes shots from that distance. Now, I always use that as an example. Well, it just so happens that we went to the Baseball Hall of Fame, and we were looking up some numbers. And so I just happened to look up one of the most prolific clutch players in playoff history, Derek Jeter. Right? This guy is like, he's as clutch as they come, right? Holy cow. His playoff averages are virtually identical to his season averages. He wasn't clutch. He wasn't clutch. He just played in enough World Series where he got game-winning hits all the time. He wasn't clutch. So is Paul McBeth clutch? Right? Paul McBeth, right? Like, oh my God, it's Paul McBeth. Like, he had to make a 30-foot putt to win a tournament in sudden death. Look how clutch he is because he made that putt. No, Paul makes all of his 30-foot putts. Right? He wasn't clutch. Right. He was just great always.
Right.
Now, there is something special about these players. What's special about these players that you would yield, I would concede as clutch, is that they don't shoot worse in those situations.
Right.
So their ability to be clutch is not their ability to elevate their game, but it's their ability to keep their game from decreasing. Because the same data that shows that there's no such thing as clutch athletes, shows that there are athletes that choke. Given a large enough sample size, there are athletes that underperform in those situations. So here's what comes down to a mental game then. Based on actual data, and this is not just two players, this is across entire NBA seasons, entire baseball careers, we've seen this. There is nothing that Derek Jeter or Michael Jordan could do to elevate their game with some mental trick. Well, if that's the case, I doubt that me or you could elevate our game with a mental trick. If Michael Jordan can't play better in the playoffs than the regular season, we're not going to play better at a big tournament than a small tournament. So there's nothing we can do mentally to play better. What we can do, however, is play worse if we let our mental game harm us. So therefore, the trick is to not do the things that will cause your mental game to get worse. Right? Basically, what it comes down to is you need to take your mental game out of the equation and play at your base level, which, by the way, is the same. That's how you play a league, and it's how you play in the backyard. That's your skill level. You want to play can't play better than your skill level, but you can definitely play worse. So I believe where this all circles back to then is the first trick to not playing worse is to recognize that you don't have control over elevating your game. You can't make yourself make a shot, right? There's nothing you can do in that moment to do better or to have control over your shot going in or your shot working. So you need to let go of the stress over thinking the mental game is so important, and then just let the mechanics kick in. Like let what they call muscle memory, it's not really muscle memory, but what they call muscle memory is accurate. The best you will ever play is the way you play when you practice or in your backyard when your head's not in the game. And the data backs this up. So the trick to mental game, regardless of where you're at, is to just let go. Let go of the control. Let go of thinking you can make the outcome better or worse. And just throw the disc. And it's going to go in or it's going to not go in at the same probabilities as your skill level dictates, and you have no control over that. Just don't play worse because you're stressed out or anxious or frustrated or mad. You know, the reality is that neither the positivity nor the negativity help you or hurt you. It's an illusion. Like here, I'll give you one more example. This is just this is all based on data. Like I'm a nerd. Like I'm telling you, I like math, and math trumps opinion. If the math disagrees with my opinion, I will concede that my opinion's wrong because the math is right. So along that same idea of being positive or don't be negative, if you were to ask people what the number one most important thing to being successful at putting is, they're going to say confidence, right? Like you've heard that all the time. When I'm feeling confident, I can't miss. Okay, 100% myth. Okay, what happens is that when you are making putts, you then feel confident, and then when you think of your experience, it was a day where you were feeling confident and putts were going in, but you felt confident because you made putts, not the other way around. Now,
right.
Now, I can back this up. I can back this up with very hard data. So the nerds, like myself, but probably smarter than me, have broken down entire NBA basketball seasons. And they wanted to study. Like, let's look at the data. What happens? What is the probability of a player making a shot after they've made the previous three shots versus had they missed the previous three shots? Right, that's a good question, because if you listen to every sportscaster, they're going to say players get in the zone. They're going to say a player has a hot hand. If you were listening to the players, they might tell you that they were feeling confident, and that's why they were making these shots, right? All right, well then you should see a difference in shooting percentage had they made three in a row or missed three in a row. And it turns out that if a player makes three shots in a row, and this is across tens of thousands of these scenarios, if a player makes three shots in his row, the likelihood of him making the next shot is basically his season average. If he misses three shots in a row, the likelihood of making the next shot is basically his season average. Right? It's no different than you flip a coin three times, it comes up heads three times. What are the odds the next one's heads? Well, it's 50-50, right? It's an independent. You're getting an independent result a result independent from the previous 3.
Right.
So anyways, that's what the data shows. Now the question is, well, did a player feel more confident after making 3 in a row versus missing 3 in a row? Because look at the people in the audience and the commentators and his coaches probably think he's in the zone, right? He's feeling the flow state. Well, the data shows that he is feeling more confident. Here's why. When I said a player after making 3 shots in a row shoots about their season average, well, the reality is after making 3 shots in a row, that player shoots slightly worse than his season average on the 4th shot. A little bit worse.
Right.
The reason why is they also can track where shots are where they shoot from. And after a player has made 3 shots in a row, on average, that next shot after making 3 in a row is something like 9 inches farther away from the basket than their average shot that season. Meaning, after making 3 shots in a row, it's an average, right? But after making 3 shots in a row, they take harder shots than they do after missing 3 shots in a row. Now, does that mean they're feeling confident? There's no way to say, but I think it's a logical conclusion that that's why. So they're feeling more confident. There's evidence of this. They go 9 inches farther away on average. They miss slightly. They shoot slightly worse than their season average. But when you adjust for that 9 inches, virtually no change. They're shooting their season average. So confidence has nothing to do. It also means there's no such thing as a zone. If there was a zone, you would see a difference between making 3 shots in a row and missing 3 shots in a row. There's no such thing as a flow state. If there was a flow state, now that's the data. It's conclusive, but the player feels like they're in a flow state. They feel confident, and the announcers see them in a zone. That's our observation, but none of it bears out. Again, the only reason I'm saying this is that my approach to the psychological part of the game says when you start to recognize, if you believe me, and you can look at the data and you buy into the data and you go, oh my God, confidence doesn't matter. There's no such thing as a zone, no such thing as a flow state, no such thing as a hot hand, no such thing as being able to be clutch. All these psychological things that we think are there aren't there. I think it makes it so much easier to start to let go of the importance of this at the moment of the shot.
Yeah, I mean,
they're all bullshit.
It does make sense to me how that logically computes. And speaking of throwing shots, I know that you have your own line of discs, and the Wren, the Cardinal, most recently the Owl. Can you kind of tell us a little bit about each of these discs and what they fly like and where we can find them?
Yeah, and I hope I didn't bore you on the nerd stuff, but I just... Not
at all. You can talk about this for hours. I don't know if the listeners are going to be interested for hours, but I'm in.
Yeah, no, I mean, look, if they're tuning in to me, they know what they're going to get. This is the stuff. I love this stuff. My brain just doesn't, it just doesn't shut off. It's high functioning autism. It's plus ADHD combined with coffee. So
I can relate.
All right, so the discs, yeah, I produce my own line of golf discs called Stokely discs. They are not manufactured by another company. It's my company. We own the machines. We own the molds. We own the warehouse they're made in. We sign the checks to the people packing the boxes. It's our company, my company. I don't ever want to mislead anybody. I don't design the discs. I have someone who's an experienced disc designer doing the disc design. And the actual molding process is also an entire skill set with temperatures and pressures, and that's just not my area of expertise. So sure. We have help in the design and molding process for sure, but they're all coming off the presses on my machine. So it's my company. It's just like the dream come true. It's like the holy grail of being in the disc world, manufacturing my own discs. The Wren is a perfectly straight flying putter. It's like closest to a P2. It's unbelievable. It's straight. It's the one I putted with when I got second at the World Putting Championships. The Cardinal is an overstable mid-range, and that is the one. I don't know if you saw Chandler Fry got a hole-in-one at the Tour Championships. not tour championships, but the Green Mountain Championships.
Right.
The Green Mountain Playoffs. What are they calling it? Green Mountain Playoffs?
Green Mountain Championship, I think, is what they're still calling it.
Yeah, because you have to qualify and everything. But Green Mountain Championships, Chandler Fry got a hole-in-one with a Cardinal from Stokely discs. So that's the first Stokely disc to get an ace on the Pro Tour. It just happened a couple days ago.
That's awesome.
But it's a great overstable disc. And then the Owl is very overstable approach disc. It's similar to a Zone, but it's a little bit more overstable than a Zone, but not as overstable as the Zone OS. It's kind of like in that sweet spot in between the two that people were looking for. And then in addition to Stokely discs, I also bought Ching discs, which was a company that had been around for 14 years and went out of business. I got all 8 of their molds. So the Juju is the first of the Ching discs, which I released a few months ago. That's killing it. I mean, we've sold a ton of them, and they're coming off the presses, and we're selling them as fast as we can make them. So the Ching Juju is back.
That's awesome. I have one final question for you, Scott. I'll let you go. I know you've written a book, Growing Up Disc Golf, and what inspired you to write this book, and then what's the main thing that you wanted to convey to the readers?
So the thing that inspired me to write the book, and I'm trying to say this in a way where people still like me, but I think some of it's still a little bit of ego. Like, I'm going to be dead someday. I want to be remembered. Like, this sport's very important to me, but I don't want to. I don't want to be forgotten, and I want to be associated with the sport always. Like we just had this conversation the other day. We came from the Baseball Hall of Fame, and everybody from Cy Young to Tris Speaker to Hannes Wagner to Ty Cobb to Babe Ruth, but going back before those, like there were so many good players back then, but there's a half dozen that we know. And 100 years from now, we're still going to know those half dozen. They've hit critical mass where Hannes Wagner will always be Hannes Wagner. Walter Johnson will always be Walter Johnson. Who was the other shortstop that was the second best shortstop of that era? I have no idea. So I want to be one of those people that just gets remembered, and so I wanted that story told. So that is the first part of it. When I started writing it, I started realizing a couple other things. 2 things. The first was that my life paralleled the early days of disc golf. I started at the very beginning. My first 25 years of life kind of mirrored disc golf. I was there for most of the biggest events of the first 25 years. If I wasn't there, I have a firsthand account of what it was like to hear about that event. And so the book became, to a large extent, a history of disc golf, the first 25 years of the sport. But it's not names and dates like a history book. It's a firsthand account of the introduction of the beveled edge disc and the introduction of this and the first time this happened and when this monumental event took place. And I was standing right next to the basket when that occurred. And so it's also turned out to be a history book as much as anything. But then the final thing I realized is that I've had a very rich life. Like, I had troubles in my youth. I had I had issues and problems, and I overcame a lot of things. And I thought it turned out that I thought that the story would also be something that would benefit people when they read. I mean, it's like, first and foremost, it's supposed to be entertaining. There's nothing preachy about it. It's not like that. It's funny. There's all these crazy stories from how weird the sport was back then. I mean, this is not the sport of 2024. The rules were being made up. We called it the Wild West. Like, it was wild. And I'm very honest about these stories. So first and foremost, it's that. But in between those things, I think there are things that I think any person could maybe get something out of. Like, I hate the word inspiration because, like, I played Frisbee golf, but my life's journey, I have the same things that other people went through as well, so I tell a lot of very honest stories about things I went through. And I've come out the other side pretty damn good, but not because I was handed this. Like I've gone through some shit in my life, a lot of shit in my life. A large portion of it is the shit that I did. I did it to myself. It wasn't that I had bad luck or the world's out to get me. I put myself into bad situations in my life, but I've come out of them, and so I think there's something to share there.
Yeah, I think it's great to build a legacy. Everybody that we remember has written their story or had someone write it, and I think that's such a huge deal. And so I think that the book is amazing.
No, I know it is true, but I do think it's having agency over your own career and your own life is something that is really important. It's one of the biggest lessons. I'm trying very hard to mentor the young players on tour. And when I say young players, I guess that's every single person on tour, not me. But they, like, every one of them can learn from me as far as the business of disc golf, the having a career in disc golf, and one of the core things that I teach that it is hard, and this is hard to teach, is that you have to have agency over your own career, your own brand, your own life. You have to go after the things you want. And, I openly say there was some ego involved in wanting to write a book. I think anybody that writes an autobiography has some ego to think people want to hear my story, right? There is some level of ego there. Anybody that's done that, to say there is none would be, come on, bullshit. We know. You write 120,000 words about yourself. There's ego, but it isn't ego to promote yourself. It's what you're supposed to do for your business.
Absolutely.
I'll give you a story about this, and people might find this. Some people are going to find what I'm about to say off-putting, but I don't care, because this is how you run a business. You basically, so you are your business, you are your brand. You need to treat this just the same way as if yourself was a company that you were working for. I would promote the heck out of my sponsor, but then if you're the company, you're not promoting yourself because that's egotistical. No, it looks egotistical, but you're just promoting the company that sponsors you. If you happen to own that company, that doesn't matter. So anyways, at the World Championships this year, I was in the B pool, which was the second tier pool, but at the end of the first round, I was in first place. I had the hot score in the entire B pool. I shot a 10:51, I think, rated round at Ivy Hill, 55 years old. It's I'm pretty damn proud of a 10:50 round at the World Championships. First round, right? And I'm leading the B pool. So we're sitting around after the round. Players are sitting around the tent because they were providing lunch each day. And we're kind of sitting around eating lunch. And there were, a dozen or so players sitting around still. And Terry Miller, who's hosting Disc Golf Network, I didn't realize this, that he was up in the media booth right there at the clubhouse. And he comes running down from the media booth, maybe to go to the bathroom or something. And as he's going back up to do the media, I stand up, I go, "Hey, Terry, I was 54. I go, "Terry, I'm 54 years old, and I shot a 10:51 round. I'm leading the B pool. You should talk about that on the show right now." Okay.
I love it.
I turned around, and a lot of these kids are looking at me like that was so brass. And I look at them, and my exact words, I go, "That is exactly what you're supposed to do to promote your brand. Don't you ever," I did not say this, I go, "Don't any of you ever not do that if you're in this situation. Because if you don't, he ain't going to do it for you." And so, it sounds arrogant, it sounds whatever, but it's not. It's this is what you're supposed to do to build your business, right? So
absolutely,
I teach this because all these kids that are waiting for stuff to come to them, it's unless you're Gannon, Burr, or Paul McBeth, or Simon Lizotte, and by the way, nothing came to them. They still had to do things to earn it. But if you're everybody else on the pro tour and you're waiting for stuff to come to them, you're hanging drywall in 10 years. And
yep,
They don't need to be. They can build a career in this sport if they don't sit back and wait for it to happen. They got to go after it, and some of them will, but some of them won't, and they're going to be bitter later on in life. I don't want any of them to be, but some will.
Yeah, hopefully they take your advice. I will tell you, I'm 100% on board with what you're saying, because I've spent a lot of my life promoting someone else's business, building somebody else's kingdom, doing things for other people with very little recognition. I've definitely done that. And as I've gotten older, I realized that, hey, I do need that agency in my own life. And so I 100% agree with what you're saying.
Yeah, and you have to do it unapologetically. And if people think you're just promoting videos, promoting yourself, and my responsibility is to my family, it's to my retirement fund, it's to my employees. If I got 9 employees, if my business doesn't succeed, I don't pay. They don't pay their bills. So my responsibility is not to the people that think I'm being egotistical, or what I mean, like that. That doesn't matter. What matters is the people who count on me for their paychecks, and my partner and my kid.
Absolutely.
But you have to have agency and recognize that's what matters.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I really appreciate you coming on the show. Every time that you tell stories, I'm always learning something. So I appreciate that. And I just appreciate you taking the time to drop in.
I love it, man. I can't wait. I enjoyed it. I got a little wordy there at times. I do that. I don't mean to. Like I said, it's high-functioning autism mixed with ADHD and coffee.
That's all for today's episode of Fight for Flight. Thanks so much for joining us. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel, check us out on Spotify, and connect with us on social media for daily updates and exclusive content throughout the week.